Alright guys, welcome back to Valorant News. More scrimbucks coming out over the last couple of hours or so, with Sentinels and NRG both starting to get some victories on the board. Some interesting results though, certainly for Sentinels, especially with some discussion going down between FNS and others as to what would occur if TenZ happens to underperform this season. TenZ obviously looked incredibly good at the Africa TV tournament and doesn't look to be slowing down anytime soon. But given the clout that TenZ potentially brings to the table, or certainly does bring to the table, if he was to underperform and the team was to need a change, would they still be able to execute that move? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Lots of roster stuff to get into today. We'll also mention that there's been quite a lot of talk over the last few months really about the number of cheaters in Valorant, especially in the Pacific region. Not exactly sure what it is out there, but we see lots of screenshots coming out every so often on players in the Pacific region that, that seem artificially enhanced to some degree. They've got the premium gaming check, clearly, with some of the numbers that you see, and even as some of the players are saying that, are looking forward to their qualifiers in the very near future. Even Daeyeon here and Ye talks about it, that, he just gets owned every game by some random Singaporean. So either there's some incredibly, talented players out there in that region, or some of them are slightly dodgy, but we know that Bleed Esports, looking forward to Ye's, debut, right, for Bleed Esports. We talked about it briefly yesterday, but they will be playing, as they are now in the official partnered VCT with Bleed. Okay, they qualified. They're in the guest slot, as Leofaria would describe it as, at least for the time being, for the next couple of years, unless maybe Bleed are selected as a full-time partner at some point, which is definitely not out of the realms of possibility, but they'll play their Madrid qualifier relatively soon, coming up pretty much this time next month. That was also what Cloud9, 100T were preparing for at the Ludwig Tarek Invitational, which didn't necessarily go to plan. Also, Defo thought was pretty cool. He's back in the league in the European side, playing with Valiant here in like the VRL for France, or whatever exactly that particular league is called. It's always kind of complicated in Europe, so I thought that was nice to see Defo back, because obviously like an OG, very talented player. And a couple of confirmations as well coming out of the Chinese region, right? We know that season, the season starts at the same time as the other regions do, but it's been slightly more condensed, right? Because their Ascension tournament was very recently, and therefore teams that were choosing their rosters, and for good reason, were kind of waiting a little bit to see what would happen at Ascension, because in the end, the best Ascension team, Rare Atom, failed to qualify. They lost in the finals. So, at least, okay, maybe they weren't the best Ascension team because they lost, right? But, I think over the course of it, people would say that Rare Atom were probably the best team and probably should have won that. They didn't in the end. So, some of those guys, therefore, get signed. I believe in the gaming, we know how much of a difficulty they caused NRG the most recent season. And we'll talk about NRG here in a second. So, this is what they're running back for this season. But also, JDG confirmed that Stu, one of the players on basically the star player really of that Rare Atom team, a Korean player actually, but he's going to be joining those guys for the new season right on JD Gaming. So yeah, kind of cool stuff. We'll see how these rosters fare, of course, and we'll see who qualifies for Masters Madrid, because Edward Gaming should be favourites, but let's not forget they closed out last year with a bit of a whimper really. I mean, the Africa TV tournament didn't go to plan for them, but at the same time they made it quite clear they'd played so much Valorant in the last few months. They'd played a ridiculous amount of series that realistically they didn't expect themselves to be able to kind of maintain that level of performance. So, big break for Edward Gaming. They come back in the new year refreshed, probably very strong, but it's going to be interesting to see who qualifies from that Chinese region, no doubt. Also, speaking of kind of this whole crossover, Disguised, right, DSG. Last year, they had a Game Changers team kind of recently that was very unfortunate because they lost to the Cheetah team and then they were out of the tournament. There's nothing they could do. But also, loads of drama, understandably, with their main Ascension roster, last season Challengers roster. Ye, of course, was on that team. And the rumor has it that they will be leaving North American Challengers to compete instead in APAC Challengers. We know that Toast, if he does it again, he's just burning money, right? And I imagine that his thought process is, if I can not just light money on fire to run this, then I probably would want to do that. So the rumor has it that they will form a new Challengers roster in APAC, which potentially would make sense for Toast anyway, because he spent his early years in Malaysia. And the rumor has it that potentially it's going to be effectively a Bleed Esports Academy roster, right? It's going to be the Malaysia, Singaporean region. And, obviously this is unfortunate, I suppose, for North America, but it does make a lot of sense, right? If you are going to sign a Challengers team again in the North American side, the salaries are higher, and are you going to get the return? Especially when Disguise just had such a disastrous end to last Challenger season. They got relegated, of course, as well from the league. So, if they had to come back in, he could come back in, sign a roster in the qualifier qualifiers and then hope they qualify, or he could take the approach of, all right, let the Challengers qualifiers happen, then let's sign the best team among those Challenger teams, which is, that actually qualifies. That's a possibility as well, and that probably is the way to go if you are going to do it in the Americas. But if you are going to do it in the other regions, you might be able to make it work better, because the rumor has it that this is going to be the roster which consists, Juicy, you guys might know that name, among players that were previously on Bleed, right? 3 players ex-Bleed. Ye was on DSG, now is on Bleed, and Legia, of course, who's the coach of the main Bleed roster, and this guy Alexar also know each other from CS. So Bodog's implication is that Bleed definitely got disguised to partner as an academy team for Challengers. So that is the present rumor that DSG are effectively going to now, run the Bleed Academy, because Bleed have a lot of money going around. So I think this probably makes sense to both parties. Maybe it's kind of sad for North American Challengers, because, maybe they'll do an organization maybe they'll do a team in both regions, but that seems kind of doubtful, to be honest. But we'll see what Toast says over the coming days here. But it does mean that one organization, a creator-supported organization that was helping the Challenger scene in the Americas, is probably no longer going to be a thing. But intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments below. Lots of scrimbucks, though, going down last night. Before we look at the scrimbucks, I wanted to share this clip here from FNS discussing what, Sentinels might do if TenZ was to, struggle somewhat. This looks relatively unlikely, but it's always a question, how important is the clout factor? Now, they're never going to get rid of TenZ from the organization. There's no reason for Sentinels to do that. But if TenZ was deeply underperforming, or they needed a roster change, I don't think they would necessarily hesitate too much for bringing TenZ out of the team, and, Pancada could come back in, and then they would change the roles around. It's very unlikely to happen. TenZ was unbelievably good back at the Africa TV tournament, but stuff like this is always something of a matter of debate.
Wait, John, you here?
Yeah. What?
Is Ethan here? No?
Yo.
Okay, wait, okay. My whole chat thinks I'm capping about this.
What?
Do orgs care about clout? Let's say they wanted to cut TenZ. Are they not gonna cut TenZ because he has clout? Let's just say TenZ is actually terrible, right? It's the worst year of his life. My chat thinks Sen will keep TenZ because of clout.
No, they'll keep him as a content creator.
Yeah,
not on a team.
Factor. I think it's a factor for sure.
For people like TenZ and you, sure, it's a factor. But very few people get that,
No, I feel even for me or
no, they would still cut. They would still cut him.
That's what I'm saying. But you would, the org would either put you to the reserve roster or keep you as a content creator.
Yeah, they'll keep you as a content creator. They'll do everything to keep you as a content creator. But yeah, you're not going to play. If you suck, you're not playing. TenZ perform badly and they drop Dapper. Clout is definitely a factor. I don't think you know anything that happens on that team.
So we believe that TenZ has kind of found a new home in the roles that he's been running, of course, on the KO and elsewhere during the Africa TV tournament was incredibly impressive. Of course, this kill he got to pretty much close out the series against Paperex was pretty, widely talked about, of course, at the time, when I don't really still know how he got the shot through that smoke there, but absolutely outrageous. So TenZ is going to be fine for these guys this season, I'm sure, but there's always a bit of talk about it, right? Top players, whether you'd want to get rid of them, and I'm sure that Sentinels would want to make it work with TenZ on the starting team if they could. But I think that the intention of those guys now is very much to, try and be as good as they possibly can. In 2021, they won a fair bit. In 2022, they became the clouted team of the universe. 2023, their intention was to do both, but they never did. And, 2024, maybe that's the time for them to shine, I guess. But they have been practicing over the last few days, of course. They're getting back into it. These are some of the results we have seen over last night from No Shadow, again, pointing them out. And we have plenty of screenshots. So, I'll go through some of the screenshots that I wanted to highlight here before we get back into it elsewhere. NRG, they have been grinding. I mean, this was up against, I believe, the 8-8 against an unknown team at the time. We also had this, though, Sentinels versus M80. So this is kind of interesting, right? Because the other day we saw Oxygen and we saw Moist play very well at the Lobby Tag tournament, make the finals together, beating Cloud and 100T, and lots of questions understandably raised about those two respective teams not playing so well. But if Moist and Oxygen are in that kind of category, M80 should be as well. On paper, M80 should be, the favourites really for this year's challenges to win potentially Ascension after just falling short last year. Sure, slightly different team this year, but on paper, they should still be very good indeed. And look, the conversation in which you know, Oxygen Esports and Moist Shopify are, that's the same conversation that M80 should be in with, on paper, a pretty similar strength of team. So just interesting to see how Sentinels get on against that type of team, right? Because M80 are clearly going to be pretty good as far as we can tell. They were 12-10 up Sentinels in this one. There was also an NRG series against M80. They were 7-2 up in this one. So, you know, NRG feels like over the last couple of days starting to understand the game as a team a little bit more, starting to get better. It is expected. The first few days of NRG practice, you would expect them to, you know, be at the worst they are going to be, and as time progresses they should get more comfortable and, you know, start to really come into their own. On paper, their team on paper is just so good that well, it's difficult to look past them beating a team like M80 theoretically. They're up 7-2 in this particular one. They're also up 8-1 here on QOR. So yeah, it feels like NRG are starting to kind of get into the groove somewhat. There was also this spotted between G2 and Loud. Very interesting. We don't often see scrimbucks from these two respective teams, but G2, given what we've seen from Cloud on 100T, I'm sure G2 will be confident they can at least be better than any of those teams. But we know that Sanak himself has actually said that he feels like Loud, despite losing Aspas, are getting underrepresented, underrated, which I think they probably are, really. I still don't think they're going to be spectacular. You know, I still think Lev should be better than Loud with the roster they've put together. But I do think people are overlooking Loud somewhat, and still should be a very competitive outfit. So they were 8-5 up here against G2. It's just scrims at the end of the day. And there was also this spotted, though, with Sentinels down 0-7 to an unknown team. Unfortunately, we don't know who they're playing against here. I'd love, you know, to find out results from like an NRG Sentinels scrim, because I don't know if they would play each other really. I know that a lot of the time the pro teams like to play the challenger teams because it's great practice and they don't reveal anything to other teams. Like Sentinels and NRG could very feasibly match up against each other in a decider series to qualify for Masters Madrid in about a month or so's time. So do you want to practice against them? I don't know, but we'll see. I mean, Sentinels must have been playing somebody good, you would think. Unfortunately, we just don't know. So apparently, according to Zelsis, this ended 13-11. So do you believe that's true? After going down 0-7, do you think they came back to win 13-11? I don't know, but that apparently is what Zelsis said on stream. So maybe take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But Sentinels are doing okay elsewhere as well. And yeah, if you want to believe that they came back and won 13-11, then feel free to do so. But on the whole, NRG looking a bit better, and Sentinels maybe still trying to find their groove again after taking the break over the Christmas New Year period. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.